that leads me on to tonight's duel. Joining me is political commentator Connor Tomlinson and journalist and author Michael Crick. Is freedom of religion and conscience under threat in the UK? Connor, first, let's go to you. Can you explain to us a little bit more about what ESG actually is?
Yeah, environmental, social and governance scores are a corporate social credit system cooked up within the nexus of both the United Nations to hit their 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, the World Economic Forum as a sort of policy nexus for big capital and world leaders, and the leading hedge funds around the world that are bankrolling it. They're subsidising this activism: BlackRock, State Street and Vanguard. To break down for your viewers, it's an insurance mechanism against the get woke, go broke principle that would allow us to boycott every company that is signed up to this otherwise. And so what happens is these hedge funds subsidise any company that decides to debank people like Nigel Farage or divest profitable investment in fossil fuels and energy security into renewables that aren't quite there yet, or spend loads of money on diversity and inclusion training schemes and signed up to have people in their advertising like Dylan Mulvaney, even if it puts off consumers, as we've seen with Bud Light. And so it's large capital ideologically monopolising the market against what regular people, regular thinking people and Christians like you and me would prefer that they didn't do.
And Michael, is it not a problem that the Church of England is signed up to that? Does that not put it in conflict where it's focusing more on things like reaching net zero than on the traditional goals of a church and, promoting the gospel and defending the faith?
Well, I think if Jesus Christ were alive today, he'd believe in net zero.
No, he wouldn't.
Yes, he would. Jesus Christ lived a simple life where he spent very little money. He had very few needs. He didn't lead a life of greed. And really, it's the greed of modern civilization which the Christian church has utterly failed in its duty to argue against. It's the greed that has led to climate change and global warming and is heading us towards catastrophe on this planet. And Jesus Christ, if he was alive today, he would believe in achieving net zero, and he would believe in many of these social measures adopted by the Church of England, and which Connor so decries.
Aren't you an athist?
I am an atheist.
You've just made a profession of faith on live television there.
No, I haven't.
What you've done
I've said
You have.
that Jesus... I'm not... Just because I'm an atheist, that means I don't believe he was the Son of God. I don't believe in God.
Yeah,
but I believe he had a lot of sensible things
Connor,
to say.
Why do you disagree that Jesus Christ wouldn't have been in favour of net zero?
OK, so first of all, I kind of raise an eyebrow at any atheist that tries to use my own values to subvert my own politics. Second of all, net zero is the new revelation. It is the new apocalyptic narrative which has displaced the idea of an eventual rapture that human beings will sit around and wait for and be in constant moral preparation for, because you never know the hour of judgment. So you've got to be a good person until you are judged. Instead, it has the Promethean ambition that says we are our own gods, we can master the world, we can master ourselves, and so all we have to do is augment human behaviour and then we can reach utopia rather than utopia arriving at a time that we cannot bring about. And so it puts us, and I say us, I mean the managerial class who would like to direct how we would live, in the driver's seat and said, it's all right, just trust us, give up all of your power and all of your wealth, and we'll bring you to heaven. Sorry, quite sceptical about that.
Michael,
you ain't going to go to heaven if you carry on like this. because
you don't believe in heaven, though.
No, I don't, but I'm just... if I'm confronted by a gentleman who argues on that basis, I have to respond on the basis of his principles. You won't go to heaven, you won't be able to hang around for the utopia you believe in, and I don't believe because before long, the world is going to destroy itself at this rate.
Why, as an atheist, do you feel qualified to take a position in disagreement with Connor on a matter of theology like that?
Well, because you're
a Protestant atheist.
No, I mean, there are certain basics here. I mean, a lot of my moral principles are based upon Christian religion. I just don't believe in God, and I do believe there are aspects of religion which have done enormous damage over the last 2,000 years, and appalling bigotry and burning people at the stake and all of that. No, thank you very much. And I'm not persuaded that God exists, right? But at the same time, if people have influential positions in public life, as Connor does as a commentator, based upon their Christian principles, of course I'm going to argue about it and explore his Christian principles and say, well, look, are you really going along with what Christ says, or have you distorted and corrupted what Christ said, which I think most of Christianity has, frankly. If you think of the appalling things that Christianity has been responsible for over the last 2,000 years.
I don't like the accusation that I have been distorting something that I believe in that you don't. One of the verses that you cited there, Emma, one of the things that Christ actually says is that you cannot serve God and mammon. Now, in the Bible, mammon is commonly mistranslated to money, but it's actually decided to be a kind of entity that controls material possessions. It's the idea that you as a human being can be tempted to overthrow the hierarchy which keeps you humble in proximity to the things that you've inherited, the world, your body, your relationships, and master literally everything for your own enrichment. And what net zero is, it's the idea that if human beings without God can perfect the world,
well, if you believe
I don't sign up to that.
God created the world and you are out to destroy it. That is my argument. You are actually going against God's work.
If I can briefly prevent us from being derailed from the original question, if we can just quickly get your thoughts on, it's demonstrable. We've seen so many Christians being silenced because they're holding to traditional views, being debanked,
I don't think so.
Losing their jobs.
Is it not demonstrable? The guy in Windermere who was had his bank account closed by I think it was the Yorkshire Bank, it was because he had expressed his views on trans issues. I don't think it was because he was a vicar. Lots of people have had their bank accounts closed. Well, yeah, but it wasn't because he was a Christian. I mean, if Yorkshire Bank are having a policy of closing people's bank accounts because of their views on trans issue, which I think is a bonkers policy, if they're having a policy but then making an exclusion for vicars, well, that would be bonkers as well. So I think that example isn't a good one. Yeah, Christians don't have it all great in this country. For instance, they are the subject of mockery a lot more than other religions, and there are certain other religions which we don't dare to satirise and mock. And I think around the world, Christians are, maybe, I don't know if it's increasingly, but certainly there is a lot of persecution of Christians in the Middle East, in India, in lots of the world, and we should perhaps in the West take a lot more notice of that and be a lot more concerned about it. And I would join those concerns. But I don't. I think you are exaggerating. I mean, if I look back to my childhood and how difficult it was to grow up in an atheist and humanist family in the villages we lived in, which were predominantly Christian, I felt very uncomfortable in those circumstances. The world isn't like that now.
I want to give Conor the final thought. Why is Christianity fair game, and is this an exaggeration?
It's because Christianity is the only bulwark against the ideology for progressivism, which says we are our own masters and we can perfect ourselves.
Well, there's the arrogance, you see.
It's not arrogance. You've had your turn. Hang on a minute.
Conor gets the final,
hold on a second.
Thought.
And this is endorsed by, we come back to the UN. Recently, they voted on a resolution after the protests in Sweden that says that the government should institute blasphemy laws to prevent them offending Muslims. The UK actually voted against it. But as we've seen, as you referenced, with the abortion buffer zones, we do have de facto blasphemy laws in this country, and they only cut towards Christianity.